Welcome back to the BizApps Classroom. I'm Jason Gumpert from MSDynamicsWorld.com. This series is all about training and learning, and it's produced as a partnership between 365.training and MSDynamicsWorld.com. On this episode, my co-host Julie Yack and I are chatting about what's next. Not for me or Julie, but how anyone decides what's next in their learning journey with Microsoft Dynamics or Power Platform. Julie's fielded this question many times, and the answer, as you can probably guess, depends on a few factors. We'll go through a whole range of the ways that different people decide what they should learn next. We talk about some of the training and learning tools that people might consider based on their own situation, and we look at some of the more interesting opportunities out there for people who are looking for a change. Hey, Julie.
Hey, Jason. How are you?
I'm good. How about you?
I am good.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
All right. What do you tell people when they ask you what they should be learning next?
My first response is, what are you doing now and what interests you? Because I always think it's easier and more effective to learn something where you kind of already have a spark.
I also would wonder what they've been up to until now that leads them to be unsure of what they need to learn next or want to learn next.
Yeah, that's fair. So what are you doing now that has a gap?
Yeah. Or why don't you know what would be your next, what would be really valuable for you to know next? I guess there could be a lot of reasons for that, huh?
Right. Are you a person who likes to go to conferences? Right? Because then when's the next conference, and is it going to be the conference for you? Are you someone who wants to just dig in and poke around and learn on your own, or do you need a guided path? There's so many questions.
Yeah, I mean, one that comes to my mind is like, well, how do you make a living? Like, what kind of job do you have? Are you an employee somewhere where it's really just you have a lot of flexibility in choosing your path, or are you a freelancer, a consultant who has to sort of make a strategic decision here because your livelihood really depends on what skills you bring to the table? Are you a student or, something like that? Are you a career changer? I think all of those could play into that question.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have money to spend, or are you looking for low cost or free resources? Because things like classroom training, very, very effective, they're not free.
Yeah, they can pay off, certainly. But if you are short on capital, definitely something you need to factor in.
Or short on time. Are you doing this in between your real job because you want a different job?
Yeah, very good point.
Maybe you can't get a week away from your desk to go sit in a classroom because your boss doesn't know that you're trying to upskill and get a different job.
Well, maybe we could take a few different scenarios because we've laid out very different. I mean, some of those are very different, right? Between the student, the career changer, the independent consultant, the person just looking to sort of improve or change their or grow their skills within the job they already have. Those are all really vary.
Right. So how would you think it would be impacted if your employer is the one who's telling you you need to upskill?
That's perhaps the one, to me anyway, that has the most sort of, that you can kind of be the most thoughtful about and make a decision, I think. Because you could probably ask some people or do some research around what managers want, around what the company's goals are, and try to get yourself lined up with that. So I think those are the kind of things you might focus on there. Have you seen that case ever?
Yes, I have. There's places where perhaps you're part of a consultancy and they want to grow the practice. And so are we growing the practice to cover more additional technology, in which case I need to learn an adjacent technology? Or are we growing the practice with number of people doing the same things, in which case maybe I need to learn how to manage people and projects?
Like, so we really focus on D365 sales, and we really want to scale up our marketing automation services. So we want people who know marketing, or I guess it's customer insights journeys now, as a way to, and build up a practice around that.
Correct. So I guess the employer would determine the desired outcomes, but that also means that they're going to be the ones floating the cost.
True.
which is nice. But at the end of the day, your knowledge is something you keep regardless of where you're working.
That's also a case I've seen personally in the past where you can sometimes use that kind of requirement or that kind of direction in a company to justify going to an event if you want to get them to essentially pay for that training for you if they don't have it in house, and you can either offer to be the person bringing that back and training others, or promising to use it in some initiative that your manager really wants.
Exactly. And keeping people intellectually engaged is one of the best ways of keeping people loyal to your organization, because then you're continuing to invest in them and show them that they matter.
Yeah, I mean that is a theme that I think Microsoft really seems to have identified in a lot of its own marketing materials and sort of storytelling that it does around Power Platform especially, but also D365. People who sort of change their skills, grow their skills inside of an organization, and in an effort to change the way the company or the organization does things in terms of maybe it's building new apps, or maybe it's automating things that hadn't been automated in the past. You tend to see that at some of their conferences, right?
Right. And I mean, a lot of the concepts are the same regardless of the technology. The concepts are the same regardless of the organization you work for. It's the mechanics that are different depending upon the product, or maybe there's a different process involved in this organization versus that organization. And those are things that are easy to teach.
Well, if someone came to you today and was like, I just don't know, I could really do anything right now. I have some free time. I have money to spend on training if it's the right opportunity. What do you think I should do? What do you think is a really exciting opportunity? What would you tell them?
Well, I'd like to know a little bit more about how they got to this point. So are they someone who's been in industry for 15 years and they're just tired of being on that side of the story? In which case, you know what? Let's teach you some basics about some Power Platform stuff. Maybe attend an app in a day so that you get your hands on app making, you get your hands on some automation, and then we talk after that and see what sparked your interest. Were you most interested in building model driven apps? Did you like the data modeling process? Great. You know what? There are people who would pay you a lot of money if you can think in that way. So start with exposure to a few things, then extract out that interest before we find your path.
Yeah, I think people who come from an industry background have really incredible opportunities if they have the sort of the time, whether it's chosen or not. If they have some time to invest in learning about this space, there's what you described is certainly a great option. I think if you come from maybe sort of an older data BI reporting background and you want to modernize, this is a pretty exciting time for that, I would say.
Right. And also, some of the, I guess, the biggest obstacle for coming from industry or business and, coming to the dark side of the technology where we make all the things is confidence and imposter syndrome. People not realizing how valuable that industry and business knowledge is when they're coming here to make the software and solve the problems.
Yeah, that's and I shouldn't underplay the difficulty of breaking into a space where you don't have connections. That's super important, and I think that maybe speaks to finding an area where there is a community element. And Power Platform, Power Apps in particular, I would say really excels in that. So if you're weighing that criteria, that's probably a consideration.
Right. Well, and when you're coming with all that experience that however you got you here, all that experience, don't underplay that, because that doesn't make you entry level anymore. You might be entry level, hands on keys, building a Power App, but you're certainly not entry level in business requirements and user requirements. You've been a user of software. You understand the business. Those are things that are harder to teach than the mechanics of the software and the building of the software.
All right. Well, here's one other sort of specific scenario. I've been heads down at a customer organization for CRM, and I've been helping them keep an on-prem CRM instance alive and kicking for the last 6 years, and I can't take it anymore, and I'm leaving. What should I do next? Is that something you've seen?
Well, that actually was the motivation for the My Digest that we have at 365.training. So the thought was, I've been heads down finishing a project or narrowly focused on this one part of the technology. I'm starting to come up for air, and what have I missed? And so My Digest came out of that scenario where I need to figure out what I need to know, because I don't know what I don't know. But you have the ability there to build your profile of interests, your profile based on some job roles. And what we've done then is we go out to hundreds of different sources of knowledge on those things and give you a customized feed. And you get new stuff every time you go. You can receive it in your inbox. You can proactively go to the site and find the things you'd like to learn about. You can save them for later and so on. But it's things like release notes. It's things like Lisa Crosby's YouTube videos talking about the new release, or Deion Taylor's YouTube videos about new release. It's a great gift that Microsoft has given us with that release planning.
Yeah, you can hear as I still like people who blog, and and you mentioned some of them, as they write about what they discover, and it does tend to focus on new releases these days because it really matches with what's new and interesting to people. But as they find features and figuring out how they work well and things like that, I mean, that's still really valuable, and I read that stuff.
Yeah, and that's how I keep up with stuff. So one of the great benefits of being MVP is getting early access to things, but there is a finite amount of space in my head and a finite amount of time on the calendar. And so I can't possibly keep up with every single detail. So finding those trusted resources where I know that they've taken the time to dissect what's important to them so that I can learn that as well. That's just an amazing gift that our community gives to us.
When it comes to what you're seeing and hearing from Microsoft, I know we've talked about different options that people could follow, or different options people have. What do you hear Microsoft telling the community about what to do next, or where to focus their energies?
Low code, low code, low code, low code, low code.
Yeah.
I always tell people follow the money. So when all of the new features coming out are targeted toward low code or no code solutions, that's where the money is. And so follow the money and figure out where your place is in that low code world. And I realize, and I've had this conversation with several stakeholders that I know at Microsoft, that their version of low code still feels a whole lot like code to some people. Just because you call it PowerFX, if there's 100 lines of a formula, that's really code-like to me.
Yeah, that's always been, not that anyone's ever asked me, but when I see demos that are Power Apps, and then one of the steps of the demo is, and I'm just going to toss in a little PowerFX, and I look at what they're actually typing in, and it's not that intuitive, right? And I'm like,
Right.
okay,
My
well,
brain doesn't think that way. But that's also where the technology helps, because we're getting new Copilot features and functionality, it feels like almost every day. And so what they are doing is building in some resources to help us. The important part of that is to make sure it's a help, that you're not letting it take over. You still have to understand it enough to evaluate what that Copilot gives you, to confirm that it does what you think it should do, to confirm that it works exactly as you expect it to work, that it understands your data model and so on.
Yeah, and it's you do have a choice. I mean, I think the more technical side of things is certainly worth learning if you're willing to, but I agree with you that there certainly are expertise. There certainly is still room for expertise that's not that. That's
Yes.
more focused on process, focused on user experience, focused on data, for other things.
There are still a lot of decisions to be made, right? Even if it's a low code solution.
Absolutely. Here's another scenario for you. This goes back to our last episode. So if you were someone coming out of sort of a basic business, like an intro to business applications training regimen, like the Ukrainian cohorts that we talked about, what kind, and I think we might have even touched on this on that episode, but just to bring it up again, sort of what would those types of students or learners want to go after next? Is it, again, some of those industry considerations that we've talked about already?
Well, if you don't have app making or automation solution creation experience already, if you're coming at it from industry, if you're coming at it from any other place, and you've gone through this baseline training, you probably need to have some kind of credentials. So that could be a certification. That could be one of the hands-on skills assessments where you've taken the time to use the resources on Microsoft Learn and you have created that Power App. You have done that automation with a flow and received that credential to show that you can solve the problems when you've been given, the problem to solve. You can take that certification exam, which we've talked about my opinion on certs. I'm so mixed on certs. I understand why we need them. I wish there was a better way. I've been saying I wish there was a better way for many, many years. But if you don't have experience, then you need something to show that you have that knowledge or possess those skills. And sometimes a certification, sometimes a skills assessment is what you need to do.
Is that something where if you maybe have a really strong network, let's say, of connections and people who know you well, know what you're good at, that maybe certifications become less important if, say, you're looking for a job or looking for an assignment or a gig or whatever, that you could maybe get away with not having the certifications. But if you are more of a newcomer and need to prove yourself, that's just one of the more sort of practical ways to do it? Or is it broader than that? Am I off on that?
I think it is just this magical combination of those things, right? That as you're building your network, it's not a bad idea to get some credentials. As you're getting the credentials, it's not a bad idea to build your network. So somebody taught you something. Let that person help you. If you share on your LinkedIn profile that you just obtained this credential, which we see all the time, we're drowning in those. But if you see that and you tag the person who taught you, hey, thanks to Jason for pointing out this great learning for me. I am now certified in underwater basket weaving, right? Suddenly, that's going to Jason's network too, not just mine.
Yeah.
And
So
so I'm
be
getting that
smart
more
about it.
exposure.
Okay, I thought of another scenario.
Okay.
Maybe this will be the last one, because I've seen this one to some extent, and I know it's a real dynamic that takes place in the community. Our company will be using a D365 product. They will have a partner who helps them deploy it or upgrade it or enhance it or whatever. And the champions inside the employee organization, the customer organization, really take a shine to what the partner team is doing, really take a shine to sort of the software work that they are doing, the training that they're doing, whatever. And then they end up sort of thinking like, maybe I'd rather be on that side of the fence rather than working for the Dynamics customer organization, if you know what I mean. And we see this frequently, people come out of industry into a consulting role. Do you ever hear from those type of people and asking sort of what they should be doing to sort of burnish their skills? Maybe that's perhaps any different from anything we've already covered.
So the person who goes from user to maker.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is common. And there's loads of resources for them. There's actually not enough resources to teach you how to be a user. There's many, many more resources to teach you how to make stuff. We often put the burden of the user learning on the implementing partner or consulting firm, right? And so that user to maker scenario is very common. Just to head over to Microsoft Learn and you start throwing in keywords of things that you already know as a user then suddenly you're presented with things to learn about how to make those things that you've been using.
One other recent conversation I had, and I apologize if I've talked about this on another episode, but in talking to some consultants a month or two back, they were telling me about a client of theirs where the client internally was able to sort of nurture multiple people into sort of analyst roles internally using their dynamic solution, where essentially they were people who were skilled enough or had developed enough experience, knowledge in their Dynamics product that they were really like they had really kind of turned into internal consultants. And to me, that was sort of like, if you're a customer, that's kind of the dream scenario, I think, to have these people who not only use the system daily or champion it, but can actually help you kind of maintain it and implement new features and keep up with the release waves that are coming up. I mean, if you're an employer listening to this, I think that's kind of the gold standard.
Well, I would hope so. So I know that when I'm doing implementations, I want to do a great job, but I want to work myself out of the job. I want to make sure that what I leave behind is good for users and that there is a named point person who's qualified to take care of the little things. Right. And then when you're ready for a big update, a big upgrade or whatever, sure, call me again. We've had a great relationship. Hopefully I've made great solutions for you. But I want to work myself out of a job. And to do that, you need to have those internal facing champions and qualified people. I wouldn't want to leave it unstructured. It needs to have a little bit of structure and responsibility behind it, because when it's not structured and it's a little bit loosey-goosey, then suddenly that's when people are going in and making changes that are unmanaged and have bigger problems than that, when they're making changes in production and not following good practices. But yes, leaving someone behind who is qualified to do those things in your absence, I love doing that, because then you've empowered them and then I get to move on to the next job.
As you were saying that, I could kind of imagine a client at some point, telling you, having a conversation like that with you and being like, oh yeah, Julie, we got this all figured out. We got people who are really excited to take on this solution. And you saying, yeah, why don't we talk about that a little more? How good are these people? How good are these people really?
Yes, there are so many people who've had to have that conversation, right? And you're excited because I've helped create a solution that you're enthusiastic about, right? So that's wonderful. That's the dream. But let's not screw it up. Let's control who we're going to give those keys to when I'm gone.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a great topic. It certainly gives me a little more perspective on all the different ways that people are potentially approaching some of these questions. Was there anything else you wanted to cover here? I think I've thrown a lot of my own ideas for scenarios at you.
Yeah, no, I think we did good here today. I think I want to make sure that people know that we love their ideas to throw at us. That's what this episode came from, one of those ideas from one of our listeners. And we love to hear more of that. We'd love to have guests on. If there's someone you want to hear from, if you want to be our guest, let us know. We want to give the best podcast we can.
Yeah, let us know what you've learned and how you learned it. That would be interesting.
We'll give you some links this time to point you to that My Digest. We don't charge you for it, so you can sign up for a free account and get your profile set up and start getting the news that you need. We'd love to have you to use that tool. I use it myself so that I get the email every morning, and then I know where I need to go to learn more. Yeah,
it is very cool. So definitely check that out. Julie, thanks for making this happen once again. We'll be talking again soon, I'm sure.
Yes, thanks, Jason.
Thanks for joining us once again in the Biz Apps Classroom. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, ideas, you can reach out to me, Jason at msdynamicsworld.com, or you can reach out to Julie by email, julie@365.training. Listeners can support the podcast and get a discount on an annual plan at 365.training by visiting the link in the show notes. And that's it for this episode. We'll see you again soon in the Biz Apps Classroom.